Hi weaving friends, I thought I would give you something just a little bit different today. I was packaging up a gift of one of my handmade knitting machine shawls to give to someone shortly, and I thought I really want to do a sort of care label, like a basic care label to go in here with this, because sometimes when you gift people handmade things, if they're not really familiar, if they're not in that niche at all themselves, they don't really know how to look after it. So you definitely don't want to gift someone something beautiful and handmade and then have them chuck it in the washing machine or something like that that's going to potentially ruin the piece that you're giving them. So I did make a basic care label, and I thought this would be a great thing to share with all of you, because whether you are a weaver or a crocheter or a knitter, if you hand make stuff, you'll probably find yourself in this same situation, that you sometimes want to provide care labels. Now, back in the day when I was selling my handmade things, when I was selling my hand wovens, I used to actually hand write all the care labels. And yeah, that becomes a little bit tedious. And so this is great for people who are selling or have a handmade business as well, because you can make your care label once for a specific object and then use it repeatedly. So what I'm going to use to make the care label is Canva. Now, if you're not that tech savvy, I would say don't worry at all, because Canva is extremely user-friendly. I've actually been using Canva myself for so many years that I can't really remember when I started, though I do remember that it used to be much more basic than it is now. It has a lot more features available now. And I actually only recently decided to take out a pro account, just because I do use it for my business all the time. I use it for social media, for making documents, for making things like care labels. There's just so much that you can do, but you do not need to have a pro account. A lot of the features that you want to use are actually free. I'm going to actually share the link with you once we've finished doing our label today. And you can just click on the link and you can actually edit that yourself to either use, a very similar template that I create today, or change it around for your own specific information. I'm also going to leave a link down below for Canva. If you don't have an account, it's really easy to sign up. And as I said, so many features can be used for free. So let's make a start. There are two ways that you could potentially come into Canva and make a care label. First of all, you're going to have to come to the website, canva.com, or you can use my link down below. And in the search bar here, I'm going to type what I want to do. But the other way that I could do this is if I wanted a really custom size, I could come up to the right-hand corner here and I could click on Create a Design, or I could click on Custom Size, and that would allow me to do the exact size that I want. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go with an easy option and type in label. And it comes up with some suggestions for different types of labels. I'm going to say see all. And then it comes up with create a blank label. It's also got all of these labels here that you could potentially use. Now, one thing to note with Canva is if a design, like say this one here that says Magnolia, it comes up with a little pro icon at the bottom with a crown, then obviously you have to have a pro account in order to access that one. So if I hover over this one right next to it, that doesn't come up with the pro label, and so I could use that one for free. But we're actually going to start and create one from a blank label. Another thing that's really useful to do when it pops up with all of these labels that you could potentially use is you could get a little bit of inspiration, because sometimes it's hard to know where to start, especially if you don't have any experience with making graphics on a computer and that sort of thing. And so you can just have a quick scroll and see, you know, do any of these really jump out at you, and if so, what sort of style is it? And that helps you to know a little bit more about what you actually like. So just a quick scroll here tells me I really like this one. I like the blues and whites, and I like the botanics, and I like the fonts. And I also like this one. I really like the simplicity. Again, it's got botanics in it. I guess if you put flowers or leaves or something on anything, I'm going to like it. But anyway, as I said, we're going to create our own. So we'll go up to create a blank label. And then I want to think about, first of all, I would be thinking of the design and the colors more than I would be thinking very much about the text. One thing that I really want to point out is, if you're printing off a bunch of care labels, if you went for a lot of color on this label, then you're going to churn through your printer ink quite fast, and depending on what sort of printer you have and how good it is, you might not always end up with the best results. So what I like to do is keep, I like to keep the background either white, or if not white, then just off-white. But white is most simple, and it's going to use the least amount of ink. I do want to put some sort of botanical on here though. As I said, I really like botanicals. And so what I can do to choose something there is come over to Elements and click on that. And then in Elements, I can search for something a little bit more specific for what I want. Let's say that I decide that I want flowers, and I'll just search that as a term. And then I want to choose graphics rather than photos, and obviously I don't want to choose videos. If you choose photos, again, you're using graphics that are very color heavy and probably just not really necessary for something like this. So I'm going to pop into graphics. And then it's giving me all of these options for different flowers I could use. And there are lots that are very lovely. I actually really like this, the simplicity of this one. And when I click on that, even though it's white over here, it comes up as black over here because I've got it on a white background. So from there, I could choose to make it larger, which I will. And I can also choose to tilt it so that it fits wherever I'm wanting it to go. So let's say that I can pop it over here in the corner. I'm going to make it much bigger, because what I can do is I can control how bold this is going to look as well. So at the moment it's very bold, and which is lovely, but I want to fit text in here. And so I want the text to be sort of the main focus point. So to make it less bold, I can come up to these, see these squares here, it says transparency. So I'll click on that. And then I can use this little guide to go make it lighter or darker. So I'll make it quite light at this stage. And then the other thing that I can do is I don't have to keep the black. I can change that color as well. So I'm going to come up to this black square in the corner, which indicates the color of the graphic that I have. And I'm going to choose, these are some of my sort of branding colors. But I'm going to choose a different color so that I can show you, you know, just how you can modify the colors. So I could go with like a light gray. Oh, that's extremely light. I could try that one. It's still pretty light, but it would work. Just depends on how bold you want it. Another gray. I could try a pink. It's quite pretty. I could try a purple. Very nice. And again, if I wanted it darker, I could come back and play with this to make it lighter or darker. But let's say that I want a color that isn't actually here. Okay, so let's say that I want a pinkish kind of color, but I don't want just this straight out pink. What I can do is come up to Document Colors, and click on Add a New Color. Now this is going to let me play around with my colors in a couple of ways. So I can make it play around with the pinks, or I can play around down the bottom. So let's say I want to make this a little bit warmer and kind of change the color to a warmer spectrum. And then I could go, well, I want it a little bit bolder than that. Or I want it a little bit lighter than that. Okay, so now we've got, I don't even know what color you would call that, but it shows it up here. This is the color that I've done. If you've got a pro account, you can save these colors. I'm not sure that you can do that on a free account, but anyway, we'll go with this color, and then I can just click away from there, and that shows me the label that I've got so far. If I want to come back at any stage and edit this, all I need to do is hover over it and then click on it, and then that's selected again as a box. So now that we've done that, we could put in some sort of border if we wanted to. So to do that, I'm going to come over to Elements. I'm going to just try border on its own. Okay, and then I'll click on the graphics. So when I come here, I can see all different kinds of borders. I could make a very simple border, like a single line like this one. I could make scrolly borders and make them very fancy. So I'm just going to go with a simple line. And then I want to make that go to size up well with my actual label. Okay, that's about right. Again, I can play with the transparency, so I could take that right down. Let's just click away, so that's how it's looking at the moment. And I'll click on it again. Take the transparency right down. I want a really faint border. And again, I can come back and play with the colors. So let's see, I think I'll make a grey border this time. Just click away, and that shows me the grey border. So it's quite faint, but it is there. And then I'm going, well, I don't really want that graphic touching the border, so I'm going to select the graphic again. Where is it? There. And I'm just going to move that over a little bit so it's not touching the border. Okay. All right, we're good. Now I'm ready to put some text in. So I come over to text at the side here. What I usually do with my text is I just select one of these, usually a smaller one, so add a subheading, and then I play with the font after I've sort of got the words that I wanted. So let's say that we have a hand-woven shawl and we're giving that as a gift. So you might say on your label, hand-woven shawl, because depending also who you're giving it to, they might not even be sure what the piece is that you're actually giving them. So if you have a label there that states very clearly what it is you're giving them, that could be helpful. And then underneath that, I'm going to want to write a little bit about it. So I might say something like, let's see, what's it made of? 100% cotton. Okay, that lets the person know something about it. And then I can click over here to get some more text again. As I said, we can play around with this afterwards. So I can highlight that and change the wording. So this is where the care label factor comes in, where you're going to give the care instructions. So I might say something like, hand wash in warm water with mild detergent. Press out excess water with clean towel. And then I might say lay flat to dry. And those are my care instructions. I might want to do some more information on this as well, like I might want to say, I might want to give my website. So let's say I was doing that for myself. That just lets the recipient know a little bit more about me. They might even want to go to my website and have a look. And you might want to also write on here, so you've got 100% cotton up here. You might want to add to that and say woven by, and then insert your name, just for something extra. Okay, so now we've got all the words that we want to put on here, but we want to change the font. I actually don't mind this font, it's quite nice, but for the sake of this tutorial, we will change it. Okay, so let's go up to fonts, and if we just choose from the drop-down menu here, it shows me my recent ones, but also it shows me a bunch of others. And again, the little crown next to it means that it's for pro users only. So let's have a look at the fonts. I'm going to try this one. Whoa, that's pretty bold. Very bold. I don't mind the actual font, but it's a little bit bold. So what I could do there is I could change the transparency again, so it's not quite so bold. And I could also change the color if I wanted to. I could make it a little bit more faint. So I might have to highlight it first. Oop. There we go. So that's a little bit more acceptable. And then the font here, I don't mind that font. I think I'm just going to keep that font there, but I'm just going to move it over so it's a little bit more centered. And then I want to keep the care instructions over here because I don't want the background distracting from the text there at all. So I will change the text here to something very plain, because I think with any instructions, it's really important to have plain, easily readable text. So something like that. And then you can play with the size of that. You can have it bigger, smaller. If you don't want it all contained in that box, you can stretch it out a little bit. There are all kinds of things that you can do. All right, I'm going to, I think I will make that font a little bit smaller. And I'm also going to change the color to make it grey rather than black. Grey is just a little bit softer, so I think that's nice. And then the same down here, do I want that going over the top of that font, over the top of that background design? I'm not sure. So I'm going to see how it looks when it's a little bit smaller and see if it's too small. Okay, I might be able to make that a little bit bigger. Maybe back one. So now that's kind of got its own space without going over the top of this design right here. Okay, so let's see how that is all looking. I think I've somehow inadvertently moved my frame. I'll move it back. So now that I've moved my frame, I also need to move this over. And again, it's going to be on top of that background, so I'll just move it up a little bit. And I think that's a little bit better. So once you are happy with the label that you have made, you can come up to this share button in the corner, and that gives you a few options for what you want to do next. what I do most of the time is I go to download, and then it'll come up as a download on my laptop and I can print it out directly from there. Let's just actually do that for a minute. The download might be a little bit slow because I am in the studio and the internet's slow. Oh, yeah, it's proven me wrong. It's lovely and fast. So if we have a look at that and I choose to print that, I'm not actually going to print it, but just to show you, you can adjust the size of it here as well if you want to. So if I say scale, because that's way too big, and I'll say, I think instead I will print it at about 80%. So then that shows you that kind of size instead. And you don't necessarily want to use a whole piece of paper for one label. So this is where you can get into making multiple labels on one page, which is another thing that you could do in Canva. So that's the finished label right there. Quite pretty, quite simple, and conveys the necessary message that we wanted to convey. So I'm going to leave those links for you down below if you're interested in having a little play in Canva yourself. And I hope that this tutorial was helpful to you. Until next time, happy weaving.